as principles of and rationale for risk-based testing. So what are we trying to accomplish, and what are the basic principles of it, and what are the benefits? Then a discussion of categories of quality risk. Now there are some 24 categories of quality risks that you want to be sure to look at in your quality risk analysis. It's not just functionality. A lot of people make the mistake of just looking at functionality, but you want to look at performance and reliability and maintenance and localization and a number of other of these categories in order to make sure that you cover all the important attributes. And out on the RBCS website again, I believe it's on the basic library page towards the bottom, you'll find associated with quality risk analysis process a generic quality risks checklist that has the 24 or so quality risk categories in it, and I'd encourage you to take a look at that if you're curious about what those are. Training continued to cover the analysis of quality risks, and so the identification and assessment, how to align the testing with the levels of risk, how to document quality risks in a lightweight yet adequate and maintainable template, how to monitor quality risks during test execution and report risk-based test results. So this training is a one-day training. It's a presentation and discussion and exercise. We include this at the beginning of all of our one-week risk-based testing jump starts as a first step. We also have this available as a one-day standalone training, and we'll also have it available now as an e-learning, so we have a number of resources that support this. So with the training done, we now move on into the actual quality risk analysis session. Now, I'm going to talk in a second about how we did it here, but I want to make sure that you're aware that you have basically two options. So one option that you can use for quality risk analysis is a sequence of one-on-one interviews with the various business and technical stakeholders. And each of those interviews lasts about 90 to 120 minutes. So that's roughly the time investment that you're looking for from the various stakeholders. And you will go through and identify quality risks based on the quality risk categories that I mentioned with each of those stakeholders. And you will also assess the likelihood and impact of those quality risks, each of the quality risk items, with those same stakeholders. And so everybody contributes their own piece to that list, and then it's a good idea at the end of the week, usually that's about how long it takes to interview the business and technical stakeholders. At the end of that week, you do a quick, say, 1 hour, maybe 2 hour review meeting with the stakeholders who participated to go through the final list and make sure that they're okay with it. So, you know, each stakeholder's total investment of time is maybe 2 hours, maybe 4 hours, excuse me, total across those two events, the interviews and the review meeting. So that is one way to do it. Now, another way to do it is the way that we did it here in the Pittsburgh in this particular launch, which is the big group brainstorming session. In the big group brainstorming session, you get together all of the stakeholders in a room, and you go through that brainstorming process with them, and it takes all day. Now, obviously, this is a larger investment of time. It's easily twice as much, if not more, of the stakeholders who are participating in the risk analysis. Now, the benefit to them and to you and to everybody really is that the brainstorming approach, where everybody's together at once, does a much better job of, not much better, better job of identifying risks and especially assessing the likelihood and impact associated with the risk and building a consensus about what the different likelihood and impact ratings mean. But I would say, you know, if you can't get people to commit to doing the big group brainstorming session, don't feel like, oh, you know, woe is us and we're not going to get the benefits out of this. we have plenty of clients that use the one-on-one interview approach, and they're perfectly happy with it. In fact, most of the projects now at CA, when they do the pilots, they're going with the one-on-one interview approach. So we think that's very common for clients to do that. I don't think you're going to lose a whole lot. It's a little bit more work for you as the test person driving this process to try to build the consensus and to achieve agreement on some of the ratings and so forth. But it's still, very practical approach, and it works just fine either way. Anyway, back to our case study. So we have the brainstorming that's going to go on all day, and so we broke that all-day session, into two subsessions. So the first is an identification session, and what I did was I took the main quality risk categories out of that checklist and wrote them on whiteboards. We had 3 whiteboards in the meeting room, which is really nice. I'd recommend that if you're going to do this that way in the brainstorming session, try to use this approach. And you write the risk categories on these whiteboards and leave plenty of space, so that's why the 3 whiteboards is important. And then you give the participants in the risk analysis the sticky note pads and pens, and then say, look, write your risk items on the sticky notes, leaving a little bit of space at the bottom of them, and just go and stick them under the appropriate category. And, people look at each other's risk items as they're going up and sticking them up there on the whiteboard, and they talk to each other and think about what the product does and so forth. And so that went on for about 3 hours before we finally just ran out of steam, and nobody had any new ideas for risk items. And we had 100 of them, which is fairly typical. 100 to 200 risk items is a fairly typical number to get. We also identified some byproducts during that risk analysis of 11 project risks and 3 other issues. Now, this will tend to happen, and don't worry about it if it does, but don't get hung up on these project risks. Remember, they're byproducts. You just want to identify them and move on. So at that point, it was noon, and we took a break for lunch. And I think the break for lunch is a good idea. If you're going to do these all-day brainstorming sessions, give people a chance to sort of walk away from it and go off and do something else with their brain for an hour. I would not try to do the catered lunch and then try to cram more brainstorming or risk assessment into the lunch hour. I think that's just too much. So we took an hour lunch break. People came back afterwards, and we went through each of the risk items and assessed them. And we rated the likelihood and impact for each risk item. So I would go through, read the risk item off on the sticky pad, and then ask, okay, what do we think the likelihood of this is? What do we think the impact is? Now, likelihood, let's be clear about what likelihood is. Likelihood is the likelihood that when you receive something to test, it will contain one or more bugs related to the risk item. So that's the likelihood rating for the risk item. The impact is, let's assume that the product did contain one or more bugs related to the risk item, and we didn't find it, and it went out to the customer. So now the customer is being faced with the typical kind of bug that we have and related to this risk item. How bad would that be from a business sense? Okay, so likelihood is a technical question, and the technical stakeholders obviously going to have more insight into this. Impact is a business question, and impact is more subjective. So what we typically find when we do these launches with clients is that the likelihood ratings are not too terribly hard to do, but impact, it takes